Hello and welcome back. It's nice to see you. Today I have the lovely Sara Haboubi, who is the Managing Director and Lead Trainer of Quantum Leaps, providing professional, educational and personal development programs over in Ireland. Although she doesn't sound very Irish, but I won't hold that against her. Sara's passion is helping people to move forward in their lives. And since 2002, she's worked with hundreds of individuals and dozens of companies and organizations delivering in-house workshops and open training courses. Sara originally qualified as an environmental building services engineer in 1994 and worked as a consultant and project manager until around 2001. In 2002, she changed career path and began pursuing her journey into the world of personal development, primarily through neuro-linguistic programming, otherwise known as NLP. She is a certified trainer of NLP, a timeline therapy trainer, a speed reading instructor, empowering learning master trainer, and now a licensed MBI. She has a first-class honours master's degree in adult learning and development, as well as qualifications in training, education, anatomy and physiology, motivational interviewing, 7 Habits for Teens, and is licensed to use the Richter Scale motivational assessment tool. I'm trying very hard not to feel too intimidated. Sara is an absolute legend, and I am thrilled that she has really kindly agreed to come on and have a chat with me. And I'm really interested in talking to her more about the Jumpstarting Learning Skills system, which helps to improve the ability to learn for people with dyslexia. So Sara, first off, hello.
Hi, Claire.
I
sound so old. I sound so old when you read that whole list, and you mentioned the fact that I qualified in 1994. And
yeah, but that was only 10 years ago. We're okay.
Definitely.
So, Sara, just tell us a little bit more about your journey. How did you get to be where you are now?
So in 2002, I actually completely changed career path. I originally actually went into business with some partners. I lived in Bangkok at the time, and we opened up a holistic health center. I was interested for quite some time before that in personal development, and had done a lot of reading, or as someone put it, shelf help. So I was reading and then going, that was brilliant and really life-changing, but I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to put it back on the shelf. Yeah. So I did I think I was in training. So a lot of shelf help went on. And I went into business because I was really, really interested in helping people. So obviously engineering is quite significantly different from a kind of career in one way. But when I came across NLP, which was about 6 months into the center being opened, it made so much sense to my very kind of engineering brain, because in a way, and linguistic programming is engineering for the mind. It's how can you re-engineer your perspectives on life so you can have a better experience. And I was just blown away. I just thought this was incredible. Had a session, and within 20 minutes, a problem I had been carrying around that I really thought was part of who I was, that it was my personality, fundamentally disappeared. It was completely gone. And I hadn't had an experience like that before. I tried all kinds of different things beforehand to get out of my very, very low period of my life, because my first marriage had failed, and I was thousands of miles away from family, and my friends were my family over there, but obviously they were mainly expats as well. So I felt quite alone and quite kind of isolated. And when I found NLP, or NLP found me, I suddenly realized I had a very real and very tangible way of actually taking control back of my life, and of creating a new life, one that I wanted, instead of just sort of fumbling around and going from one drama to another, and kind of thinking, how did I get here? What am I doing in this situation? How did this happen? And thinking everything was happening to me. I suddenly really had this incredible set of tools to go forward and start to really create more of what I wanted. And luckily, the lady who I had a session with was a trainer. She offered to do a course, so we did it half in the center, half in my apartment. There's only 4 of us on it, and I was so, it just resonated for me. This is what I had been looking for, and I was 31 at the time. So, when I speak to young people who are struggling to find their passion, I always say, look, you're probably going to have 4 or 5 different careers really in your life. So don't worry too much. Whatever you're interested in right now, we don't know. We don't know what's around the corner. And I'm really glad I found it when I did. And I went on and I then did the other levels and I became a trainer and I was delivering trainings there before I then moved to Ireland. So for 18 years, I've been working, NLP is the basis of everything I do, including the Jumpstarting learning processes. And I've worked with actually probably thousands of people at this stage and tens of schools, so 70 to 80 primary schools. I've delivered training to staff. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey so far. It's not over by any stretch of the imagination. I've still got a lot to learn and a lot to do. And the next step really is to find another medium and another way to really get this information out there, particularly really to parents who have children who are struggling. And my big passion really is how can we help those who learn differently to learn what they need to learn and to be able to get on and pursue their passions and follow, find their purpose in life. Yeah. So yeah, kind of a little nutshell, but it's all about empowering people. And it was because of my own personal experience, really. I was just blown away, and I just thought everybody needs to know this. This is such simple stuff, really, a lot of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my reason for being here, I think, is just to get this information out there. I'm like a messenger.
Yeah, brilliant. I think a lot of people that I speak to with regards to this sort of stuff and with the direction they've taken in their lives, it does seem to be they've found it fairly, I don't want to say 30s is late on in life, but they found it a little bit later than they thought they would. And, that's okay. Because I think you have to go through all the shit at the beginning of your life to figure out and to look for something that's going to help you. And then when you find it, it's like, this is good. I need to share this. I seem to encounter
it's having that experience of really being in a very, very low point and having had not just that low point, because we all go through low points as teens and maybe 20s and whatever, but it's the low point plus all the baggage from the past on top of you. So as you get older, it's not just that this is the low point and it's kind of isolated from everything else. It's now, it brings up all the stuff that you've been through. So yeah, as you go along in life, we're dragging the past around with us, literally, not leaving it anywhere. Like, no, we need, it's a bit like a security announcement in an airport, isn't it? No unaccompanied baggage. Gotta make sure you bring it with you wherever you go. And and people don't realize actually how easy it is to just put it down. And we think we need to bring it with us. We think we need all this, burden of emotions, with us, that somehow that's going to protect us. So I think if you have this experience a little bit if you kind of learn this stuff a little bit too young, whilst it's fantastic, and I totally, I'm a big advocate of giving people these tools very kind of early on. I think it tends to be when someone's really a little bit older and has had a little bit more shit, as you said, to kind of carry around. It's that relief. And I think that the contrast is so big.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, absolutely. So with that said, what inspired the Jumpstarting Learning Skills program?
So when I first arrived in Ireland, within about a year or so of being here, I met somebody who was a coordinator of something called the School Completion Program here. And I always believed, when I was taught NLP right at the beginning, I just thought, if every teacher had this, if parents had this, if teens were given, younger people as well, but more teens in terms of how they can see the world differently, I think the world would be a very, very different place. So I always believed it belonged in schools in some way, shape or form. When I met this guy and I explained to him what I did, first of all, he just went, okay, I have no idea how I'm going to get you into the school, because this is so fundamentally different from what we'd be doing. They had counselors and they had art therapists and they had breakfast clubs and their target was to prevent teens from leaving school too early. So there was some kind of medium risk and then some very high risk of leaving, before they had completed even their first set of exams. So anyway, eventually I got a phone call about 6 months later, no, maybe it wasn't that long, but about 3 months later, and he said, okay, I have someone for you, can you help him? And without even really knowing the story, I said yes, because the beauty of NLP is I'm not the expert. The person is the expert on themselves. So I know no matter what the problem is, my skill set is to help them to find their solution that suits them, that empowers them. So I'm not going to tell them what to do. And he said, we've been working with this student since he was in primary school. He's actually a few months away from doing his final exams in 6th year, and he's thinking of leaving. And we can't seem to persuade him to stay. And they've done so much work to bring him that far, and they couldn't believe in the last hurdle he was going to fall. And he'd been suspended several times, and the school wanted him out, and his mum couldn't be bothered turning up to school all the time to deal with this. And so I couldn't even see him on school grounds because he'd been suspended. So I actually had to see him separately in different offices. And it was a really interesting experience because what I was told about this student and then the person I met didn't match. He's a troublemaker, all this kind of really negative stuff. And I do my best. I'm human, but I do my best to just go in with a clean slate. And I go, whoever I see, that's who I'm going to be working with, not this version that I'm being told. Yeah. And I didn't see that version of what I was told. I saw a very bright, very articulate young man who was in a lot of emotional pain. And when we kind of started working, he said something, and straight away I was like, okay, light bulb. And he just said, well, I'm stupid. And I thought, okay, so try this on. If I think I'm stupid, am I going to try at school and risk failing? No. Am I going to put any effort into something and then be told off because it's not good enough? No, of course not. It's safer to be sitting outside the principal's office, having been the class clown, than it is to be sitting in the classroom feeling stupid and feeling like you can't do anything. So absolutely straight away, I knew where I was going with him to help him. We did a very simple technique, and he was able to swap that belief of I'm stupid for I can do anything I put my mind to.
Oh, brilliant.
And by the end of that session, he'd grown, to about 7 foot tall. He was he was a big tall lad anyway. And I just said to him, what are you going to do? Because I said at the beginning of the work with him, I said, look, I'm not here to tell you what to do, and I'm not here to force you to stay at school. I'm here to help you make the best decision for you. Mm. So whatever that is, I said, I have no stake in this. You stay, you leave. That's nothing to do with me. This is down to you. I'm just here to help you. And at the end of that session, I could see that a huge change had happened inside of him. So I said, what are you going to do? And he said, well, I'm going to stay. I said, why? He said, because I'm not stupid, and anything I put my mind to, I can do. So it was a brilliant, he was just using the language straight away. And yes, and he went, he stayed. I had to have, I think, one more session with him just before the exams. He had a bit of exam nerves. And he stayed, and he actually got, here it's a point system, and the top scores are 600, and he got 250 points, which was pretty incredible considering he hadn't done any work until schoolwork really until we'd started. So we only had about 3 months preparation, and they were gobsmacked. They couldn't believe the results. They said, well, will you come and work with some other students? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So for 6 years, I was an external consultant working at the school. I started with 6-year students with exam pressure and motivation, things like that. And I said, at the end of that year, I said, I'm actually a bit late. This is a bit late, really, to be working with these students. They've already got bad habits. They're already missing so much information. They've got a very negative view of education and their own abilities. And this is a big ask to kind of come in at the 11th hour and work with these students. Is there any way I can get them maybe at the beginning of their 5th year instead of 6th year? So I ended up the following year with 5th years and 6th years. And at the end of that year, I said, I'm a bit late. Do you think I could get them a year younger? And over the years, you could see this pattern, and I kept getting them younger and younger. And I was then working pretty much with as many students as I physically could across the entire school. And then my last year I was there, I was given a cohort of about 40 first and second year students. And it was this very strange thing. I was given this remit of helping them with their numeracy and their literacy. So I'd gone in on a kind of more behavioral, motivational, but they said, but you're getting such incredible results in terms of their results, their actual test results and exam results. You're obviously doing something in terms of their learning. These students are really, really struggling. And initially, the principal who was there at that time wouldn't let us see the reports, but did they have any assessments, anything, labels, nothing. I wasn't allowed to see any or know anything. And luckily there was a change of headmaster, and the new headmaster, the new principal, was brilliant. He was really open, and unfortunately he passed away last year. He was an amazing man, and he really turned the school around, and he said, whatever you need, you know, we're here to help. So I then finally got to see the reports on these kids to see, well, what am I dealing with here? Because I don't, these are complete unknown quantities. I don't really know what's happening. I had no baseline, I had no goal. It was just improve their numeracy and literacy. And I said, but they've just had 8 years at primary school. Surely they all know how to read and write and do basic maths. And it turned out, no, they didn't. And I was going, well, what have they been doing for 8 years? And I was so, when I eventually saw the reports and the assessments, they were the alphabet kids. You know, they had pretty much every diagnosis, you know, ADD, ADHD, ODD, you know, ODD is oppositional defiance disorder. I said, well, my husband has that. And, you know, he doesn't do as he's told either. And, you know, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, you know, it was like every label under the sun. And I had these 40 students who all had these one or multiple labels. And I was like, what am I supposed to do here? I had no idea what dyslexia was. I hand on heart really thought it was that there was something intellectually, you know, that their IQ was maybe low, and because I was thinking, how can you not read? Surely this is a simple thing to do. And I just assumed it was letter reversals and things like that. I mean, I really knew nothing about it. This was not my area. But being me, I'm a bit like a dog with a bone. If I'm given a problem, I'm not going to just let it go. So in NLP, the question in NLP about everything. So why NLP is so brilliant is because the question is, what's the difference that makes the difference? So when the amazing therapists who were modeled to bring the techniques of NLP together, when the guys who created NLP looked at these therapists, they were saying, well, what are they doing differently that gets these incredible results versus what everyone else is doing? So not what are these people doing wrong, but what are these people doing right? What exactly are they doing that's really kind of cutting through the problems and getting these incredible results so quickly? So in my head, I was like, okay, so what's the difference that's going to make a difference here? And I realized I just didn't know what dyslexia was. And I thought, well, if I know what it is, and if we can bring it back to the whole point that everything we do is strategies, that we're using internal and external elements to get from A to B, to everything we do involves our senses and involves thinking and involves language and other, you know, all of this stuff, then surely there's got to be a way of helping someone with dyslexia to then create a better strategy for learning that works for them. And I was like, I need help. And the universe, you know, ask and you shall receive. And I happened to go for the first time that year to the NLP annual conference in London. And I met a wonderful lady called Olive Hickmott, who was giving a talk, and her talk was NLP and learning difficulties. And I couldn't believe it when I opened the brochure and I saw this, and it was about dyslexia and everything else. So I went to listen to her, and it was one of those light bulb moments, and the hairs back of my neck and my arms stood up as I was listening to her, and I just thought she is a genius, and absolutely, and I can say that hand on heart is completely true. She's also dyslexic herself, so she has a very first-hand real experience of what it's like to be dyslexic and what it's like to live in that world. And because I really desperately wanted to help these children as much as possible, we talked. I bought her books, I listened to her CDs, and then eventually, when I'd read everything, gone through the material, I brought her over to Ireland. So began, and her process was called Empowering Learning. So Jumpstarting comes from that. It's kind of expanded a bit since then, and it was really, really eye-opening, and I was getting incredible results immediately with these kids, and they had struggled for years. They had learning support when they were at primary school. They had reduced timetables. They were getting learning support in secondary school, but it was the same thing just being done over and over again, expecting obviously a different, you know, definition of insanity, expecting a different result. Yeah. So, you know, because phonics and put my teeth back in, synthetic phonics is the general way in which reading is now taught, especially here in Ireland. It's very auditory based. It's the sounds, it's segmenting and blending. So this is this sound, this is, you know, you break up the word and you create the different sounds and then you put it back together again. And for most people with dyslexia, that doesn't work.
No.
It doesn't work because their brain is predominantly visual. So if you go through a visual door, you're going to have a very, very different result, because actually, when it comes to language, we have multiple mode coding in our brain. It's not just the sound, because when you get to the written word, when you're writing or you're reading, it's visual. And it's not just visual in terms of the word, it's visual in terms of what does it mean. So if you've got concrete nouns, it's a visual image. And if it's then semantic, if it's in terms of the context and everything else, it's, how do you understand what you're reading? So we've got the auditory, we've got the visual, we've got the meaning, we've got the sense of it. When we're writing, we've got the kinesthetic element of it, the muscle memory. There's multiple modes that are all coming together in order to create this experience. They all come through different channels, but they all come together, and then they're encoded, and then they're stored in long-term memory if it's all working. And we know from fMRI scans of people with dyslexia when they're reading, this was the work of Sally Shaywitz over in Yale University. Try saying that when you've had a few drinks. Not that I had a drink. And
you should.
Coffee. But so what she found with these, so what they were doing was they were doing brain scans as people were reading. So the ones who didn't have dyslexia, when they were reading, what they noticed was 3 parts of the brain would light up. So there's, and they're all on the left side predominantly. So you've got this area at the front, which is called the Broca's area, which is articulation, so the pronunciation. And that lights up whether you're reading out loud or reading in your head, by the way. It doesn't make any difference. Then you have an area about here, which is called the parietal temporal region, which is sometimes called the word form area. And that is also connected quite closely to the occipital temporal region. And the occipital lobe is the visual center right at the back of the brain. So essentially, just as I've just said, you've got multiple modes. So you've got the auditory, the parietal temporal region is the meaning, the analysis of the word, and then you have the visual representation. So those 3 all light up in the brain. Contrast that then with someone with dyslexia reading, only the Broca's area is lighting up, and it's much, much bigger. So there's a lot more work going on at the front of the brain. It's more around articulation, but it's not linking with meaning or the visual recognition. And for reading and for spelling, was particularly reading, we have something called RAN, rapid automatic naming. So when we see a word, we're actually not segmenting and blending. We recognize the whole word, and we know immediately, what is that word? We've got a word bank, and it triggers the word bank. It's got that recognition. So that bit of research is really eye-opening, because bizarrely, and I think it's because most people, when they come to learning difficulties, are looking at it through a learning deficit model. So what is it this person cannot do? And because they can't do phonics, then it's let's do more phonics until they can get it. And it's like, okay, but what is it they can do? And generally speaking, from research, that people with dyslexia and even ASD, on the spectrum in some way, are often very visual and big picture thinkers. So if their visual system, and we know again from research in neuroscience that often so in someone without dyslexia, generally speaking, the left hemisphere of the brain is slightly bigger than the right hemisphere of the brain. We know with people with dyslexia, they're roughly the same size, which means the right hemisphere of the brain is slightly bigger than usual. This is where we have our visual spatial part of the brain. It's much more about big picture. It's much more, people do think differently. We all think differently, but this is really very, it's not in line with the way they're being taught. So Olive's process was very much about jumpstarting the visual part of the brain, connecting words and images and meaning all together. So you're learning in a global manner. You're not trying to learn in this little detail that's mainly auditory and then building up. It's like it's all of the information, and then you can drill down into the details. It's actually easier to learn that way anyway for most of us. It's called deductive learning. We have the big why, what is this? And then we kind of go down to the pieces.
Yeah.
And it's just the most remarkable system, and it can help with, we start with spelling because spelling is the easiest to teach this process through spelling. Spelling is often ignored. A lot of people say, oh, you have spell check. it's fine, you know, but I know from talking to people with dyslexia for whom spelling is, because it all manifests in different ways, it's not just one thing. But spelling is an issue, and if you don't know how to spell a word and you're trying to write an essay or write a report, and you can't spell it, and it's such gobbledygook, spell check can't even begin to decipher what it is, or you use the wrong version, which in English obviously we have, you know, English is crazy, though there's French as well, that, you know, you're not communicating effectively in the written form, and it leads to a lot of self-doubt and low self-esteem and anxiety in school and even at work, and there's a big link between dyslexia and depression, you know, and it's all because of this inability to link these two things together. And so we just take a shortcut, we just go in through the visual door. There's a little bit more to it than that, but you know, it really is a much simpler way in, because what we're doing is we're using what's called a strengths-based approach. So we're looking at what's the difference that makes the difference. Well, if they're visual, why are we trying to force them to be auditory, you know, in terms of their predominant way of experiencing the world? So yeah, we've seen incredible results. I have a fantastic school that was my pilot, and I have to give a shout out to Shay McCarthy, the principal of that school, who had great faith in me when he met me, and he gave me 15 minutes, and 2.5 hours later he left my office, invited me along, and I taught all of his staff and staff from 2 other schools, and for a year, you know, I monitored the progress of his staff and the students, and they've never looked back, and that was in 2013. So this has been 7 years of them using it, and they have incredible results. Their students, certainly from age 7 upwards, the lower end of the school, we're kind of in phase 2. We're making sure that we can tie this in, because we're not throwing phonics out. Phonics works for about 80% of the population, so we don't want to throw it out. But it's about giving another, so that's more auditory. We want to give a visual set of tools for the toolbox too, but that's a little bit more complex because a lot of teachers, their hands are tied. But once they get into about 7 or 8, away they go, and they're using this the whole way then up to the end of primary school. And I'm emotional every time I go into that school and I see these kids with self-confidence, self-belief. They know how to ground themselves to get into a great learning state. And even if they have a label of dyslexia, they can all spell and read, provided they use this system. And we had a lovely little lad, he's gone now actually, but when he arrived at the school, with this, he already had been assessed. His mum came in after a little while after kind of having joined the school kind of late. So I think he was maybe, he must have been about 10, I think, at the time. And the mum came in and said to Shay, I just want to show you something. And she showed him a video of this little lad going completely berserk on a Thursday night before the Friday spelling test, like really distressed and just going crazy because he just couldn't learn his spellings. And Shay was shocked because this lad was really quiet at school, and you know, you would never have known that he was, you know. And she said he is now getting full marks for his spelling tests. His confidence has grown. Nothing's phasing him. And he stood up and actually spoke to a group of teachers in training at a teacher training college, and was spelling, you know, 11, 10, 12 letter words, you know, forwards, kind of reverse spelling as a little trick to kind of show that we were seeing it. And she just said, thank you for giving me my child back.
Yeah.
And to me, this is what it's about. It's not actually about the academic achievement. It's about that. Without that, so many doors are closed, and particularly self-esteem and everything else is so low. So I love this incredible knock-on positive effect that actually happens for kids when they, and adults. I work a lot of adults. I did it with my master's research, and it's so much more than spelling and reading and handwriting. It's really a set of skills that help people who have been labelled as something wrong with them to realise there's nothing wrong with them. In actual fact, most of them are incredibly intelligent, higher than average IQ, very creative, really brilliant at something. But the focus has not been on that, it's on what they can't do. And when they can do this stuff, their whole world changes. And it's just, I won't be stopping anytime soon, put it that way.
I should hope not. It sounds fantastic. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we've all grown up being taught through no fault of anyone. It's just how it's done. That if you're not good at something, you need to practice until you are good at it. But sometimes why focus on the thing you can't do? Why not improve the thing you can do? And it took myself a long time to get my head around that, the fact that, you know, I'm not that good at that. I'm going to do what I do best and delegate the rest. And it took me a little while to get there. But obviously at school, when you're in the middle of learning it all, you can't just go, oh, well, I'll delegate my spelling to, and there has to be a way around it.
One of the things that, so Paula Monty is my business partner. So her and I, we've created the Jumpstarting Learning courses. So we've done an online one for parents, which is just word skills. So that's spelling, reading, and handwriting. And we've done a bigger one for teachers, which includes word skills and organizational skills and a bit of coaching and all that kind of stuff as well. And one of the things that we often hear is, you know, or that we've kind of realized, is that the skills that you need in school, so if we just call those in-the-box thinking, and in-the-box thinking requires obviously your basic reading and writing and number skills.
Yeah.
And in the past, that was all you really needed. You needed to be able to have those skills. You needed to be able to follow procedures. You needed to be able to memorize and regurgitate. And you could get a job. You can join the army. You could be in a factory or whatever it was. So it's the conveyor belt education system, and it worked because that was the end purpose of education was being fulfilled. The education system has stayed as it is, but the world obviously has completely and utterly changed around it. The skills that we now need to survive, and not just survive, but thrive in the 21st century, do not include memorizing and regurgitate. We have Google. Do not involve procedures. We have AI. You know, anything that a computer can do, we are going to see gradually as time goes on, those jobs will be taken over by AI. So it's about how do you become more human. And our whole thing is about actually a guide to being human. It's not a guide to kind of being a computer and a robot and being able to tick the boxes and be part of the bell-shaped curve in the middle, and we're all standardized and we're doing all these standardized testing. However, whilst out-of-the-box thinking is what is being revered now, and you've got to think outside the box, and it's like, well, some people can't do that, just as some people can't do the in-the-box bit. Some people, and so our whole premise is actually about choice. Someone who's brilliant at out-of-the-box thinking, who's struggling with the in-the-box stuff, so the spelling and the reading and you know, basic number skills, if that's what their specific struggle is, because it's not the same for everybody, but anything of those kind of basic levels, that is still important. And you can learn how to do those things. It's not about not doing them. You're not going to delegate, and you can't, as I said, spell check is great, but if you've got the wrong version of board, you know, when you're talking to about something, or the wrong version of, you know, your is misspelled more commonly than anything else, as opposed, you know, as in you are, as opposed to belonging to, and all these things. It reflects something back when someone's reading a report and everything else, or they're struggling with it. There's no need to do that. You just have to find another way in. It may not be what they end up loving, but at least if they can do it, they have a choice when they have to tackle things that they can do it. And the beauty of this is that I am actually much better at thinking outside the box than I used to be. So I've trained by learning and understanding about these different strategies, is I can now actually think big picture. I can actually see things from a completely different point of view. I wouldn't say that's still my strength, but having this choice to go between the two is absolutely key. So you want to give everybody the choice that when you're tackling something, are you using in the box, out of the box, or a combination of two? And as long as you can do both, then really I think the whole education system can actually move forward, and society, I think, as a whole, you know, would really benefit greatly from that. We're all going to kind of gravitate towards, you know, really what our strengths are, hopefully, rather than trying to just kind of keep plugging away at something. And it's like, okay, I'm not so good at that, but if I want to be, how else can I get into doing it, rather than doing it the same way as everybody else? It's not working for me. So you've got these kids sitting in class kind of looking around going, I am spending hours every week on my spelling, and trying to learn my spellings, and you might have the Friday test syndrome, which is where they get 10 out of 10 on Friday, and then come Monday they haven't got a clue, so they're only holding it in their short long-term memory, not deep learning. They've not made, the brain hasn't made enough connections and neural pathways to hold on to it. And our way is very much about a much more global, holistic view of learning, because it's much more than just spelling, as I said, spelling, reading, or handwriting, or maths. It's giving people an understanding of their brains, how their brains work, and how can they make the most of how they're wired. And it's just incredible to see that. And when people have a choice, they have so many more options, and it's just much more freeing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I had no idea there was so much involved with reading and writing. Just when you were talking about the parts of the brain, it's like you just do it. You just pick it up and you do it, and you don't think about everything that's going on in the background.
Incredibly complex. And actually, we don't have, this is a really interesting fact, we don't have a reading center in the brain. No, we don't have a reading center. What we do is the brain is hijacked. Certain areas of the brain are being utilized for it, because the written word is it's an invention. It's a human invention. It didn't evolve. Somebody decided somewhere that we were going to use these symbols, and people thought it was from pictures and everything else, but the word cat doesn't look anything like a cat.
Yeah.
It's a C and A and a T. It's representing the sounds, but it's not representing the image. So our language evolved, yes, absolutely. So we do have a language center in terms of speech, but actually the written word is a very, very new invention for the human race. So we haven't evolved a part of the brain to do that, but we very cleverly utilized what we already have to be able to read and write. And when you realize that, you kind of go, yeah, why should someone just naturally be able to do this? Of course, some people pick it up and they make the link between what they see and what they hear and what it means. And there are some children who arrive at school at 4 or 5 and they can already read. They've already made that connection, not through any formal instruction, but because their brain has made those connections. And most children are shown, and if it's phonics or whatever, look and say, or whatever system the school's using, and eventually it'll click. Not because of the system, but because their brain suddenly starts to make the connection between the parts of the brain that they need. And then you have around 10 to 20% who this just doesn't work for. They need explicit instruction to their brain as to actually how to link these things together. And once they're shown it, then they know, they understand. And then it's just a case of practicing and building up the networks. But I have some wonderful stories of people who were kind of written off and improved. I mean, I had one little boy. He was over the course, not for me actually, one of my coaches, because I train people how to do this. He went from his, like, literally the teacher had said this child at 7 will never be able to read, so he was doomed to a life of illiteracy already. And my coach luckily was working with him, and in 6 months he improved by 2 years. So he went from a reading age of about 5 to his reading age, and he actually matched. And with a lot of teachers who are using this in school, especially early on, the minute now they see the child struggling with phonics, they know they need to come in with the visual system. And this is not look-say. So any teachers out there who listen, this is not the same as look-say. This is something different. And they'll bring in the jump-starting process, and they often see those children leapfrog over their peers because they've got the system and it works for them. That's what they use. So why would they go back? There's no reason to go back and do something that's not working. And I love it when you work with little kids, because they kind of go, oh, is that what I'm supposed to do? Okay, all right, I can do that. And then they just go and do it. They don't even realize that the whole world has just suddenly changed. The parents are like, God, I can't believe my child who has been struggling for years in the space of an hour and a half is spelling the word envelope, and with confidence and everything else. So it's very quick, it's very easy, it's fun, and it's not about drilling and repetition and going over and over and over and over, which is, can really just put anyone off.
Yeah, and actually, I think probably one of the first times I met you, Sara, was in a bar in Italy, I think, and we were chatting, and someone came along that we knew whose other half was dyslexic, and I watched you in the space of 15 or so minutes show her how she can spell a word that she'd never ever being able to spell, and it was absolutely fascinating.
I've forgotten about that. I've forgotten about
yeah.
that. Yeah, I was with a bit of wine on board, so yeah, not bad going really.
Yeah, but just, I mean, just in 15 minutes, which kind of sort of goes into my next question was, you know, this sort of teaching, is it really just sort of angled towards kids, or is this something that adults can benefit from? And I mean, clearly they can, but
anybody, anyone any age.
Yeah.
No.
Do you find or do adults tend to pick it up quickly as well?
Yeah. So my master's was in adult learning and development, and my research project was using this with adults. And you might think, well, why did I go from schools to adults? And my theory in my head was, if I can help someone who has struggled all their lives to, in a very, very short space of time, learn how to spell and to read better, and they're 55, then I know someone who's 5 can do this, because they don't even have any of the baggage or anything else. So, excuse me, I really wanted to work with adults who also had a lot of motivation to do it and everything else. So it was like, no, so anyway, a kind of 2-year-long story short, I did end up with a group. I had 7 adults ranging from kind of mid-20s up to mid-50s, and I only had 2 hours a week with them. So I was working with them as a group, so I was showing them the process, and I'll never forget it. It was just incredible. Now, I had done interviews and things with them separately, to obviously for my research side of it, to be able to quantify the changes as well. And I remember distinctly that one of the men on the course, who was in his 30s, who had not disclosed that he was dyslexic to his family and friends and work colleagues and everything else, and he'd struggled since he was 4. At the end of the first 2 hours, when I was explaining about the brain and about how we need to make these connections, use the multiple systems together, and you know, how we store information and how we can access it, we need to get into a calm state, because nothing happens when we're stressed. You know, none of us can work properly that way. And he came up to me at the end of the 2 hours. He says, "You've no idea what you've just done." I was like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And he said, "I now know for the first time since I was 4 that I'm not stupid."
Yeah.
He said, "I just wasn't taught the way that suited my brain." And he was remarkable. He practiced every day, because once you know the system, you do need to practice. It's a skill, so you do need to practice it until it becomes automatic, like driving. You know, it's like anything. And we had a chart, so they all had their charts to fill in every day of the new words they'd learned. And at the end of the second week, you know, his chart was chock-a-block. It was full of words. And then at the end of the third week, he came back and they were kind of all showing me how many new words they had, and there was nothing on the page. And I went, "Is everything okay?" And he went, "Look," he said, "I've learnt so many new words, I can't keep track of them." He said, he said, "In fact, today I was driving here, there was a van in front of me." He said, "I knew the word in front was kitchen." He said, "I've never been able to spell kitchen before, and I can tell you now how to spell it, because the minute I looked at it, my brain recorded it." So he said, "I'm not even having to do the process anymore. My brain's got it." He said, "I don't need to write it down." He stopped taking his antidepressants. He applied for a new job. His entire life opened up. He just said, and he gave me a card and a box of chocolates at the end. And I was like, "Thank you very much." And, you know, and I didn't open the card and read it, but when I got home and I read it, I was in floods of tears, because he said, "I have never given anybody a thank you card when it comes to school and education. You are the first person, you have basically set me free." And I was just like, I'm getting emotional even just now thinking about it. It was just incredible. And the stories, and they were so candid, and they were so open with me and shared their life stories with me. And it was brilliant. And I remember one of the older guys, who was a very wealthy farmer, cattle farmer, multi-millionaire, couldn't read, had to get his wife to do all his paperwork. And he came in one day, he said, "I've lived in a place called Portumna." He said, "I've lived near Portumna all my life." He said, "Only today did I actually look at the sign properly." And he said, "Now I know how to spell it and I know how to read it." And he just said, "It's just clicked." So the wonderful thing about working with adults is, actually, more often than not, the words are all in there.
Yeah.
They've seen them, they have been storing it. They just haven't made that connection. So often this is like a key that what we see is, and it's sometimes in children as well, if they're very young, not so much, but with older, teens, maybe people in their 20s and older, it's like a key that kind of unlocks that part of their brain, and suddenly it opens up. I had a wonderful student who was studying at Trinity, so obviously no shortage of brains. He came to me, and we had a whole day together actually, working through this. And he contacted me afterwards, and he was brilliant. His mum had helped him from a very young age. She recognized it because she was dyslexic. She'd helped him with his self-esteem, so he never suffered that way from it. But he said it's just really frustrating not knowing how to spell the word that I want to use. He says I know the word, but I can't see it and I can't spell it. Anyway, he contacted me after his final exams and told me he'd got a 2-1, and he got a first class honours for a particular project, and it was about his learning experiences. And he had referenced working with me. He said again, he just walked out and he went, "This is life changing. This is a game changer. This is really a game changer." So yeah, I mean, but the adults are interesting because I often approach people. If I hear an adult is dyslexic, I'll say, "Do you want some help? I know how," and they're like, "No, you're all right, thank you." And I think part of it is it's become a big part of their identity.
Yeah.
They've had to work incredibly hard to get around it in some way. So they've become really, really successful, but they've had to sort of circumnavigate around this problem. Maybe they haven't told people. There's a lot going on with adults with it. But I know from first-hand experience that when adults actually do this, it's just a piece of magic, and it doesn't detract from them as their personality or their gifts and their talents. In actual fact, it just really elevates them, more. So yeah, adults can do it. Parents can learn how to do this and work with their kids. The school, that's the pilot school, is fantastic because they use it across every classroom with all children. This is not just for learning support. This is actually, they see this as a tool that if every teacher understands, then the minute somebody is struggling, whether they have a label or not, but if they're struggling to learn something, they can step in and coach them. It's much more of a coaching system than a teaching system. And it's much more about identifying each individual's learning strategies and what are their strengths and things like that. So it's a very different approach, but it's not complicated. It's not rocket science, but you can use it to learn rocket science if you want. So yeah, but it can certainly launch people's education, to a totally different level without it being really massive hard work. I have to say I'm a fan of shortcuts. I love one of the quotes I heard right at the beginning, which was from one of Olive's clients, little 9-year-old, and he said, "Well, this is just too easy. It must be cheating."
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, that sort of says it all, doesn't it? Really, it's like we're under the illusion that for something to be valuable and everything else, it has to be hard and it has to be a lot of effort and energy into it. And the reality is actually, not if find a shortcut, not if you find, and that's what I like. This is kind of cuts right the way through and helps people to get an outcome really quickly and success really quickly. Yeah,
it's interesting you say that. I get that quite a lot with EFT because people say, "Oh, that's too easy."
Yeah,
and they veer away from it because it's too easy. It's like, well, what's wrong with it being too easy? It's
really interesting. Tell you what, all right. I'll make it a little bit complicated.
I'll make it more complicated. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah. So Sara, I know we're all still kind of in our houses at the moment, but what are your plans for the rest of the year?
Well, it's quite funny because now we say going to Tesco's is going out. So go for a walk is going out and Tesco's is out. So I think we're in Ireland, we're approaching going out. We might even be able to go to other people's houses shortly, So Paula Monty and I decided as soon as lockdown happened, because I was homeschooling, I have 2 boys and one's primary, one's secondary, and so secondary guys, he was pretty good. He was able to look after himself as much as possible. I stepped in whenever he needed me, but my 10-year-old, obviously, he's 10. He's not going to be able to just sit in front of a computer and teach himself. And both my children, by the way, really struggled with phonics. So I was really lucky that I had this at the beginning. And particularly my older son, he was doing lots of, now, just so people know, if they're listening to this, letter reversal, number reversals doesn't mean a child's dyslexic. Most children will do those reversals at the beginning until their brain kind of gets which way it's meant to go. It's if they're still doing it by 7 or 8, there's definitely an issue there. You want to look at that because it should have settled down by then. But he at 5 or 6 was reversing everything. Everything was round the wrong way. He was really struggling with the segmenting and blending. And I'm actually convinced that his brain definitely works in a very different way, you know, from mine. And I was so lucky because I actually happened to learn this at the time that he was doing this. So within 2 weeks, so I know as a parent, I was able to use this with my child. So anyway, coming back to lockdown, you know, with my 10-year-old, I was getting very frustrated with schoolwork. Because kids can be angels at school and at home is completely, you know, because there's no risk of you not loving them.
Yeah.
You know, they can do what they're going to push your buttons. They're going to do what they need to do. And he literally would be doing, and I'm not kidding, he'd be doing his maths, doing a headstand on the couch behind me, and getting me to read out the maths questions, and then I would have to write he'd work it out, and then I'd have to write it down. And I was thinking, well, if he can do his maths standing on his head, I think I'm okay. So that was fine. But we were chatting, and I said, I'm so lucky. My kids have overcome any challenges they had with learning. They don't struggle to spell, they don't struggle to read, they don't struggle to do maths. What on earth is going on in homes where children have had a lot of support at school? Parents haven't known how to help their child. They've been relying on the school, and now the parents are having to be teacher and learning support teacher and mom and dad and everything and do their job. So we made a very easy decision to just give the online training for parents for free. We said, if this could help in any small way, and if we can bring, you know, rather than the parents struggling to get through the works, you know, the work for the week in terms of worksheets and things like that, and if they can actually just go, look, if at the end of this lockdown your child can spell and read really well for the first time, then they'll catch up with everything else.
Yeah.
So we're really, you know, it was very easy. We just looked at each other and said, yeah, we can't charge this is, you know, people have lost their jobs and everything else. So we didn't want to put them under any extra financial pressure and try to also take a bit of educational pressure off. So we've had a fairly good uptake. We've had a few hundred people sign up. And on a Wednesday morning, so tomorrow morning, every Wednesday from 9 till 10 British Standard Time, we do an hour. And we're bringing people on our journey. The more we're discovering about the brain, and the more we're discovering why this works and what you can do. And we bring a bit of NLP in. We bring a bit, obviously, the Jumpstarting is the lead. And it's very practical, and it's just an informal chat, really, that Paul and I have. So a couple of weeks ago, we shared our new model of the working memory, the understanding of actually how is it we're learning and thinking. And it's really exciting because we can't find anything else out there that matches what we're saying. And we feel it's a little bit more of a complete picture, you know, than what's kind of currently out there. So that is there. And just speaking of my 10-year-old, he must have actually heard me. Dill, I'm on a call. And yeah. And yes. Are you recording? Are you recording? So I'll be out. She's going to ring me. Yep, I'll come and see. We're nearly done. Bless him. You're on telly now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was amazing. That's brilliant. So where can people go to find out more about that?
So if people go to the Jumpstarting website, so it's Jumpstarting, it's a bit of a long URL, sorry, jumpstartinglearningskills.com. They can see some videos. There's a couple of TV interviews that I did and some radio interviews as well, and they can listen to Shay McCarthy talk about his school. There's a whole lot of stuff there. There's also a checklist. So if someone's wondering if their child, or if they're dyslexic, or if their child's dyslexic, or even dyscalculic, actually they can have a look at this checklist. It's free. They can just, now we're not assessors, so we're not diagnosing anybody, but we're showing some of the both what children generally can't do and what they can do, that can often, when you see these two in kind of in conjunction with each other, you kind of go, oh, that's my child. So for the child who's the classic dyslexic, so really bright, really articulate, really clever, really good at something else, just struggling maybe with spelling or reading or handwriting, or if they're dyscalculic, they're good at reading but they're not very good at the math side of it. This works incredibly well. We know for that cohort of students it works. And then if they go to the parents page on that, they'll see the link then to the course. It may still say buy now. I'm not sure. I haven't kind of necessarily done all the changes over time, but it's free. For the parents one, it's free. The teachers one, there is still a charge. So they can go and they can have a look at that, and they can access that. But I would advise people to come along on a Wednesday morning, or go to our Facebook page, which is Jumpstarting Learning Skills. And if they go to the Facebook page, they can see the recordings from the lives that we've done, and articles and things that we posted as well. So we're trying to give as much as we can, so people can enjoy themselves.
Yeah, awesome. So, and I will also put links to all that in the comment section, so people can just click on that. So Sara, thank you so much. This has been absolutely eye-opening. It's been so interesting. Just before we finish up, is there any advice you can offer people who have dyslexia, who are finding it impacting their lives in some negative way?
So for me, I'm quite jealous, because pretty much everyone who I have worked with who's dyslexic has got some amazing skill somewhere. Like, I mean, and they'll probably just take that for granted. You know, they'll say, but surely everyone can do that. And I'm like, no, I can't. You know, and we know from statistics around the world that about 60% of the world's entrepreneurs tend to be dyslexic. And that's not because they can't work for a company. It's because actually being an entrepreneur means that you see a solution that nobody else does, and then you create a business around that solution. So that's obviously how their brains work, which is what makes them great entrepreneurs. And we know also about 40% of the world's millionaires are dyslexic. So I'd quite like to be dyslexic, thank you very much. I think it'd be amazing. Is to really to actually tune into how amazing their brains actually, because everyone's different and everyone's unique, and it's not about who's better and who's worse. I mean, I don't subscribe to dyslexics will rule the world, but maybe they will, who knows. You know, I think if we can, but it's about the individual saying, okay, and it's not lip service to just go, you know, all these incredible people around the world who you know are dyslexic, and more come out each year. You know, you start kind of these actors and actresses and scientists and Nobel Prize winners and inventors, and you know, most of the inventions and advances in maths and science over the last 150 years are with people who have a learning difficulty. You know, it's insane. So I think and a lot of people kind of go, well, that's all well and good, but I've really struggled. And you go, okay, so first of all, see what you're good at. And one of the things to really pay attention to is how good the visual system is. So, you know, when you think of something, it's probably not just one boring thing. It's probably a big picture. There's lots of information, lots of detail. It could be moving. It could be multi-dimensional, you know, multi-perspectives. You know, not everyone can do that. And if you can kind of tap into that and notice how good that is, that's really the way in for words as well, because words are visual, but you just want to calm it down a bit. You don't want too much information. So part of the process is something called grounding. Grounding has been around for, you know, millennia. It's just an ability to really get into your body, be really calm, and when you're calmer in your body, but your mind is open, so you don't want to be horizontal. It's not like meditation or mindfulness where you're much more internally kind of calm. You're with grounding, you're calm, but you're alert. So it's the perfect learning state. That's how we then learn to control our mental imagery. So there's lots to read out there about this. So a guy called Thomas G. West, he's written lots of books about this. He's dyslexic himself. He wrote a book called In the Mind's Eye and Thinking Like Einstein, and his latest one is all about different perspectives, seeing what others can't see, and it's all about mental imagery. And that was really how Olive kind of, you know, pulled all this together. There's lots of different kind of strings that and her genius was just remarkable in bringing this together into this format. And then we were lucky enough to learn it and be able to go on and create some different kind of courses from that.
Yeah, awesome. That's fantastic. Well, Sara, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day. You got any plans for the rest of the day?
I think there's friends, the children are now getting to see their friends, so that's all happening. So that's wonderful for them, because they're reconnecting with their pals, and that's amazing in them. So when they're doing that, I'm actually mum free. I'm child free. I don't have to hear the word mum or mummy for the rest of the afternoon, which would be
oh, it's been such a joy. Thank you so much for giving your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me on. letting me
Absolutely.
ramble on and tell my story.
It's
But
been
I
absolutely fascinating.
genuinely hope it's helped somebody somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. It's been awesome. Thank you so much, Sara. Take care.